Taking care of my mind, body, and soul.
For me, self-care means community care.
I practice self-care by regular breast self-examination.
I practice self-care by creating or joining spaces that allow me to express myself.
Self-care is all about prioritizing me time.
I practice self-care by choosing to use a long-term birth control called an IUD to prevent pregnancy.
Hello, I'm Christy Cade with the White Ribbon Alliance.
And I'm Cindy Garcon, Coalition Director of the Self-Care Trailblazer Group. We are thrilled to welcome you to the Self-Care Learning and Discovery Series. We are a global coalition dedicated to ensuring everyone practices self-care. We advance self-care advocacy, evidence, practice, and learning to support people meeting their own health goals and to strengthen health systems.
The World Health Organization defines self-care as the ability of individuals, families, and communities to promote health, prevent disease, maintain health, and to cope with illness and disability with or without the support of a healthcare provider. The series has invited more than 50 organizers from around the world to share what self-care means to them in practice through 16 individual sessions. While each session examines self-care through a unique lens, they are very much connected. We encourage you to participate in as many as possible.
The Discovery Series is open to everyone: advocates and activists, healthcare providers, government officials, program implementers, community members, because all of us should have a vested interest in self-care. We hope you share your own ideas and insights throughout the series and keep the conversation going by becoming a member of the Self-Care Trailblazer Group. We'd like to thank the members of the Self-Care Learning and Discovery Series Steering Committee, Advanced Family Planning, JPIGO, PATH, Population Services International, and most of all, White Ribbon Alliance. Without you, this learning opportunity would not be possible.
We also want to thank all of the session organizers who have dedicated their time voluntarily to curate this event. We should also say that each of the organizers took on the responsibility of the content in individual sessions, and so they might not necessarily reflect the views of the steering committee. Please take what you learned today and apply it to advancing policies, programs, and practices that enable self-care, universal health coverage, and your own individual health and well-being. Now, without further ado, we turn it over to today's session organizers. Thank you.
Thank you and enjoy.
Welcome and good day to all of the participants in this event. My name is Diana Moreno, and I work currently as advocacy advisor at Profamilia, Colombia. I will be here with you as the moderator of this exciting space that we will have in the next couple of hours. Let me first thank to all of our selected panelists for being with us today. And I would also like to thank the White Ribbon Alliance, Balance, and Profamilia for their lead in the hosting of this space. As part of the Self-Care Learning and Discovery series, today we will be talking about self-care and bodily autonomy, liberation, and gender transformation. Next slide, please. I would like to ask for all of the people who are with us in the audience to please introduce themselves on the chat box. Please write your name, your organization, your country, or your email address if you want to be contacted. And I will be reading some of your names so that we can have an idea of who is with us today. We have currently 50 participants, and it will be great to know who you are. Welcome, Ana Cristina Lindsay and others, like Nisha Sai, Rajenda Bandra. Okay, welcome to you all. Next slide, please. So just before we start, I just want to make like some housekeeping reminders. This event will be bilingual. We will be speaking throughout the event, both in English and in Spanish. So you can use the interpretation to either accommodate the language that you listen to in Spanish, English, or French. And this will be available throughout the whole session. I would like to remind you that this meeting is being recorded for purposes of knowledge management, and please keep yourself muted unless you are speaking. You can use the chat box at your right part of the screen if you have any question or you would like to build upon a point that has been made. You can raise your hand digitally with the Zoom options on the low bar of your screen if you would like to speak during the Q&A spaces that we're going to have today. And of course, stay curious and engaged. We are sure that you're going to have a lot of fun in this very interesting session. Next slide, please. So today's event is an interesting one when completing the several discussions that we have had through the self-care discovery sessions. Today, our focus will be around self-care as also a tool for bodily autonomy and liberation. We will start having a wonderful conversation between Oriana and Marta, who are directors from Balance and Profamilia, and who will be reflected upon the role of self-care and collective care, as well as the role that social movements, institutions, health providers, and all social actors have when thinking about this way of self-care and collective care. Afterwards, we will have an exciting panel of discussion in which we will have representatives of the Red Comunitaria Trans and Liga de Salud Trans and the Red Companera, the Latin American feminist network of abortion doulas, who will tell us in practice how their experiences have been when promoting self-care and collective care in Colombia and in different countries of Latin America. And last but not least, we're very excited about having Colleen join us from the Feminist Self-Defense session with Guerrilla Fit, where we will have a small exercises. We will get physical, we will be able to get some comfortable, and then reflect upon also self-care and collective care when it comes about feminist self-defense. So welcome to everybody. And with this introduction, I will ask for the next slide so that we can get to start discussing. We want to ask for our participants some questions before we get into the deep arguments of this discussion around self-care and collective care. So we will be sharing with you a link on the chat in order for you to enter to a Slido and be able to respond with us these 3 questions. What self-care activities do you practice that make you feel powerful? What comes to your mind when you hear collective care? And what is the role of your organization in enabling self-care? So please get in and respond, and we will have a couple of minutes to get up your reflections upon these questions. Currently, we are sharing this in our chat. So the name of our technical expertise, which is Natalia Buchwald. And you can also join it by your phone, either scanning this QR or entering to slido.com and introducing this code 693756. I can see already some of you are responding, so I'm positive that the links are working. I'll give all of you just a minute so you can have time to answer. Thank you all for participating. I'm just giving some more seconds so that you can provide us as much input as you can. All right. So let's start seeing some of the reflections that you have made. On the first question, what self-care activities do you practice that make you powerful? We get here some very concrete, some very concrete ideas like sex education, time for yourself, wash my teeth, diabetes control, birth plan, monitoring, exercise, strength training, read, emergency contraception, youth community sessions, control over my body, ride a bike. That's lifting weights, saying no, which is a really powerful thing, saying no to things, resting, rest, okay. So this is part of what all of us might be doing in an individual way when we take control of ourselves, but at the same time, doing that self-care is also related to us feeling powerful. Let's see the next question, please, Natalia. So on the second question on what comes to your mind when you hear collective care, many of you responded community care, caring for a neighbor or a friend, safety and power in numbers, vaccination, interesting debate we're currently having around self-care and collective care, empathy, that we take care of each other support to others, interaction and support to each other. I just want to take this opportunity to remind for all of our participants and audience, just to try to be mindful of keep their microphones closed when they are not speaking in this event. Thank you greatly. So we have also sense of community and being social, holistic care, which I think is a very interesting word that comes here, and we might be taking on it just a minute from now. Okay, Natalia, so let's go for our third question. What is the role of your organization in enabling self-care? So we're talking about education, probably as the most repeated word and the most of the things that we're doing in the different organizations that are here, self-care contraception products, self-care advocacy, a professional union, supporting and ensuring continuously during this difficult time, work with governmental bodies on developing self-care national guidelines, get together, empowering rural communities, advocate advancing on self-care policies, products, and practices through advocacy, research, and implementation. And this one that will really connect us to what we'll be talking during this session, the building and strengthening of the movement. So thank you all for your answers. I will now like to give the word to, just 1 second, please. Are you able to hear me well?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, so I have presented myself. I'll just go through it. My name is Diana Moreno, currently the moderator and advocacy director of Profamilia. But I will now would like to give the word to Oriana Lopez Uribe. She's the executive director of Balance, and she will be telling us about the reflections of Balance around self-care and collective care. Welcome, Oriana.
Thank you, Diana, and thank you for the Slido word clouds. I think that they were very illustrative of what we were going to be looking at during this and the next 2 sessions after this one. Well, first I wanted to say that there is something that from Balance ignites us to be here, and has to do with the part that the system right now and the way that we have as different societies and as diverse as this world is, the main part of the world is having this political approach to well-being that is being very individualistic and is not acknowledging necessarily what the specific needs of specific people are in order for them to have well-being. So there's this part of what we are talking about is not only about being able to access commodities, it's not only about being able to access contraceptives, it's not only about that, but it's what is well-being for each one of us is different. It's not the same for all of us. As we said, as we put on the work club, we could see the diversity there's in this room. And in this room, we can say that we are pretty much the privileged part, or even if we are not in the same level of privilege, we are within our communities have certain privilege, since we're having internet connection. We are, in my case, I'm speaking another language, so I can also have access to education in order to have another language. And these kind of things, I just like, you know, like if this is the diversity that we have, this was having time for myself. Why is having time for myself part of having a self-care part? Is because maybe that person was a woman. I'm just gonna jump into conclusions. I'm sorry if I'm assuming anything that's wrong, but I just wanna use the word cloud as examples. So having time for myself is something that not many women can have, since they are taking care of their families, of their communities, of other people's needs. It can be because of their professional work that they're doing, because that is the way that gender is still having us in little boxes of what women do and what men do. And what we want to do is change and break all those boxes and being able to completely be free of those boxes. But the reality is that right now, those are the kind of things that for many women, they still need time for themselves, because we don't know how to have time for ourselves. We also live in a very capitalistic and productive work world that is asking us to be productive the whole time. So we cannot still sit still and just think about the air. What is, like how this wind feels amazing. Like we don't even have the time for that. And what we're trying to do with this is also trying to understand that the system is not just impacting us in these little things that might be like very, I don't know, we can say that they're not crucial. They're also impacting the way that we can see ourselves in the future. We can dream about what we want to for ourselves in the future, and what we are saying our children that they can dream of when they grow up. But it's also about how we want to express ourselves out in the world and what we can feel that we can decide for ourselves. One part of that is reproduction, of course. One part of that is sexuality. It's what is expected from us is to be heterosexual. What is expected from us is to be cisgender. What is expected from us is that if we have the capacity to be pregnant, then we desire to become to raise a family of our own, and continue all the pregnancies that we have. That we will put that in the center of our lives as well. And what we're trying to say is that we need to think of what Audre Lorde was saying, in A Burst of Light. Caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it's a self-preservation, and it's an act of political warfare, because the system is constantly putting us in very limited boxes and is not giving us the full package of rights. It's not giving us the full options that we should all be having. And in that way, there's a set of people that are decided to become activists and that are decided to give directly self-care tools to the most marginalized or disenfranchised communities, and improve policies around the globe and in our countries or in our cities or in our small towns to make changes that really transform our lives in the context that we live in. There are activists that are trying to practice that for themselves, and I think that is also really important. Is like, how do we make sure we are looking at this system? There are few people that can see that system and that are changing it for the rest, but we are also trying to do that for ourselves. How do we make sure that we are making the changes that we need to make also for our lives? And in that sense, there's this trap of the self-care narrative that talks about, like, if you had a stressful week, then get a massage or go to spa day or and that part is the part where consumerism or capitalism or commercialization is winning that battle and that narrative that is just keep doing everything wrong so that you will feel so tired that you will need to have a pause and a day to do this and that. And that is only allowed for people that have access to that amount of money on the one side, but also is not changing the root cause. How are we changing the way that we're working each day? How are we changing the way that we're living each day to make sure that we don't have to come to the last part of the week to look for some kind of relief for what we put on ourselves the days before. So in that sense, it's just also us changing. I'm just moving from self-care to community care. How can we see the collective part of that? How can we change as a society the idea that we need to have, I don't know, Monday to Friday time schedules? How are we changing that if we're seeing that we're getting sick? If we're seeing that it's not giving us enough time to enjoy with our families. One of the things that changed with the pandemic was exactly that, to being able to see that what was most valuable, we were missing out because we were outside in our offices. Now that we were in our homes, we were able to spend more time with our kids. And I'm not romanticizing that. Also, it implied that extra weight of work on many people, the workload of having to be the teacher, having to be the mother, having to be the wife, having to be like all those roles within the households that is very heavy and that still hasn't changed. But how do we make a collective care of that? How to make sure, can we make sure that we are And how do we see that? Is it like a community kitchen? Is it a community space for children that we can know that they are okay because someone else is there and is taking care of the community? You know, like it's not something that is just my burden because I had children, but that it can become something that the community is taking care of and is responsible of. And how do we create that community that is feeding us, that is giving us nutrition, whether it's love, whether it's food, whether it's care, whether it's medicine, whether it's accompaniment, whether it's listening to my problems, whether it's listening to my issues and giving me tools. And by tools, I mean like knowing what mental health is, giving me access to therapy, but also knowing about my body. As comprehensive sexuality education for sure is a massive tool that we're still missing, and that it's talking about how can we change the power relationships that are still there, the gender stereotypes that are very clearly not being the best for us and attacking our well-being in every way possible. So it's just how do we change from this self-care idea, from radical care? And I think the radical care part is this set of vital strategies that help us endure this precarious world that we have made for ourselves. Is how do we make these changes into having more empathy, more sympathy, and having this fellow feeling and having this community building that will enable us to create a better world, not just for a couple of people, but for most of the people that will live in this world. How do we make sure that we're not leaving anyone outside that community of care? And that, I think, is a work that belongs to every one of us in our personal lives, but also in our professional lives. And from Balance, we wanna just say one more thing that it has to do with, we need to recognize that there's a system that where we live in that is creating a lot of fragility and vulnerability for ourselves. And we need to make sure that we're seeing and acknowledging our own fragility and vulnerability so that we can take care of that, but also see that in others and have more empathy and create better communities, better strategies on how to have a counter system of care that is allowing everyone to dream what they want to become, what they want to be, and how do they envision their own well-being. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Oriana. I think you have sent some very powerful messages around that connection of self-care and collective care, being it under this idea of radical care, being it jointly towards understanding there are systems of oppression and inequality, and how self-care plays a main role when taken seriously in being able to transform those dynamics, but also alerting us about some of the uses of self-care currently that might be just being used as a small relief for what the system already works in, and does not really help to gender transformation or to any other sort of social change, which is part of what we are working for every day. And I would like to take upon these reflections that you make on that relationship between self-care and collective care, and how, in a way, when we're talking about self-care, we should be thinking not just about the person who might do X or Y practice in order to improve their well-being, but also about their whole environment. So on this, I would like to give the word to Marta Royo, Profamilia's Executive Director, for her to tell us a bit more about Profamilia's ideas around the role precisely of other actors like institutions, health providers, organizations, when it comes to thinking about this relationship on self-care and collective care.
Thank you, Diana, the audience, for their very illustrating responses, and of course, Oriana for her very relevant remarks. Also, I would like to take the opportunity to thank the Self-Care Trailblazer Group, the White Ribbon Alliance, and Balance, of course, for their invitation to participate in this challenging, very challenging space. And I think that in the middle of what has happened, especially over the past year and a half, it is definitely indispensable that we reflect upon the role of all the social actors, especially governmental institutions and health providers. What is our role as enablers of self and collective care? And very quickly, so that, you know, because I'm translating you now, I'm bringing you from, you know, from society to a very institutionalized organization. Very quickly for to share with you what we are. Profamilia is a private nonprofit organization that promotes and defends sexual and reproductive rights in Colombia since 1965. So we are kind of a mature organization. What we do? We provide specialized health services, comprehensive sexuality education. We sell pharmaceutical products, especially contraceptives. We do, and we carry out intense advocacy actions and also develop research projects. We are a member of IPPF, International Family Planning Federation, and so far, we are the largest private specialized healthcare provider in Colombia throughout our 45 clinics and around 2,000 mobile brigades that we carry out in a year. However, I have to say that despite having this very robust structure that has been, you know, building up over the years, more than 55 years now, over the past years, Profamilia has turned part of its focus on the promotion of self-care. First slide, please. So why would I like to show you here is that I think that the best way to show how we have been developing this concept is by sharing with you a very exciting initiative, which is called Global Care, a global consortium for abortion and reproductive self-care that is starting this year. This project should start next September. And what is the purpose of the project? It's especially to enable abortion self-care practices worldwide. How? Through the design, implementation, knowledge sharing of person-centered models of care that are responsive to different social backgrounds and legal contexts, engaging individual, community, institutional, and political stakeholders. This initiative, and what the slide shows, is around 13 IPPF member associations and their partners. Most of them are based in Asia, Africa, Europe, and the Latin American region, of course, will have the potential to reshape abortion access by developing evidence-based abortion models of self-care, as well as communication and advocacy tools that will help decision makers, health providers, social networks, individuals to inform, support, and empower women and pregnant individuals. And why is this so important? Why are we focusing now, after so many years, in self-care in our community? And what is the role as organizations when it comes to promote self-care? Definitely, the way we understand it is that self-care goes beyond self-managed procedures. It is more than having access to a pill or to a virtual counseling or a telemedicine service. The truth is that self-care is not a new concept, nor does it apply exclusively to abortion, even though the example that I share with you has to do with abortion. Health workers, and health experts have been promoting and encouraging this approach for many, many years now, even decades. But yes, it has been called different ways: promotion, prevention, center, people-centered access, humanization. However, the new approaches to health technologies and the increasing barriers for the access to sexual and reproductive services during COVID-19 have reminded us about the importance of joining forces and resources in our efforts to promote self-care. Next slide, please. So, as I mentioned before, and agreeing with Oriana, there are many definitions of self-care, many ways to approach it. And I would say, I will dare to say all of them are valid when it comes to the needs of a person. For Profamilia, we have tried to give it a definition so that we know what we should aim at. And the way we have put it is that self-care encompasses the ability of individuals, families, and communities to promote health, prevent disease, maintain health, and cope with illness and disability with or without the support of a healthcare provider. When it comes to abortion self-care, again, our example, the example I just shared with you means that IPPF, our great promoter, has understood the self-care notion as the right of women and girls to lead, in part or entirely, their abortion processes with or without the support from health providers. Now it is our responsibility to bring down and make it real. We love this definition. You know, we sat down and we analyze it, and we really feel related to it for two reasons. Why? First of all, it talks about the possibility of having self-care with or without health providers. In many cases, self-care is understood as the opposite of what the provider's work is about, as a replacement. In our case, in the case of Profamilia, we believe that self-care and provider care are complementary actions that, when articulated, can better serve girls and women. They can go together. They can go also separate ways, but within that, it is not one or the other as a substitute, but complementary actions. Second reason we really like this definition is that it reflects upon the powerful shift that self-care brings to our actions as organizations. You know, it's a challenge for us. Self-care is not just about self-management of medical procedures, as I mentioned before. It is about girls and women living and taking control and power about their sexual and reproductive circumstances and needs. Under this notion, self-care goes beyond people deciding whether or not they want to undergo a procedure, but when and how they want to live their sexuality and reproduction. So women and girls are at the center of all care systems. That's the way to really make it true. So in a way, we can pass from focusing on the access to services to refocusing on the life experiences behind those services. So this goes beyond just about self-management. It is also about a comprehensive experience that includes information, social and alternative care, and mental health. We believe also in Profamilia that this concept has been better understood in maternal health. Within that, and I don't know, those of you that work, whose work has concentrated on sexual reproductive rights, we always, when we compare the different services, we always compare maternal health to the rest, and we see that one of the services that more progress has been made over the years has had to do with maternal health. So, and just to give you an example again, in maternal health, we do not only talk about access to prenatal care and delivery services. What else do we talk about? We talk about labor plans, about doulas support, culturally accommodation, and different places to deliver the babies, and the possibility of women taking decisions at each step of their pregnancy experiences. What do we need to do? We need to translate those advances into the rest of the sexual and reproductive services. So we can take up a world in which we can take decisions at each stage of our contraceptive or abortion processes. Is that possible? We absolutely believe it is. We definitely can think of a world where our voices and actions can lead those of the health providers and health systems. Next slide, please. So this is just an example of a model that again has been developed by EPPF. As I mentioned before, they have been kind of our promoters regarding, have challenged us to carry out those discussions of how can we complement what we already do. And where does this notion of self-care leave our work as organizations? As I mentioned before, 45 clinics, a lot of mobile brigades. And what is the role of the governmental organizations or the rest of the health providers? I'm not going to lie, and I think a lot of people here in this that are part of the audience recognize what I'm going to say. This is a scary question for many. However, we absolutely believe that it is actually a very positive scenario. And contrary to what you might think, self-care shall not be seen as just an individual stance and obligation that relieves institutional actors from their obligations, just the opposite. And it's neither a replacement of a role as caretakers or social actors. Actually, it's just the opposite. It is truly challenging us to see how we can also incorporate the self-care notion into everything we do. Self-care opens a world of vast collaboration between a mix of social institutional actors that act as enablers and facilitators on a self-care environment. As Oriana mentioned, self-care is also a matter of collective care, where partners, family, friends, support networks, community health workers, peer providers, health, other type of health workers, counseling, pharmacists, and other civil society actors work as a very strong network and create an enable ecosystem for self-care to be possible. Under this ecosystem, all actors continue to have a responsibility and can have an active role or making possible for women to have options, which is all what we're talking about, both with or without medical providers along the way. Taking care seriously, a serious self-care program should imply for organizations and service providers, institutions to rethink our programs, our attention programs, our access routes. How can we connect with social stakeholders and even their installations? It will also be a challenge regarding installations. The next slide, please. And I'm sure that along the way and during this meeting, you're gonna hear a lot of amazing ideas from the speakers on how can, as individuals and as organizations, we can support the work of all these audiences that I just mentioned. In Profamilia, without any doubt, we are listening, we are learning, we are changing. And we would love to be an example of how we can truly walk this path of self-care and liberation and collaborative work. We want to grow. What other things would we like to do? We would like to grow as the best allies the grassroots movements can have in our country when it comes to collective initiatives. And again, I want to be back to that sense, that message of building ecosystems of self-care where providers and organizations can have many different roles that would support this type of services. We want to be the channels of communication between social actors. We want to be co-creators of self-care knowledge, to consolidate everything that we have learned after so many years of working through those different strategic lines of work with the population, with the different audiences, with vulnerable people, of being in touch with the reality of our country, so that all that knowledge can, other organizations and individuals can profit from it. And what else do we want to do? And we have talked a lot about all along this series of presentations, the need to have resources, to use them well, but also of living capacity installed, building capacity and living capacity installed in territory, in the rural areas, with the social society movements, with the grassroots movements. We know, we understand, we see it every day that in many cases, many of these social movements, they lack the organizational or administrative capacities to receive resources. We want to be their best partners so we can help them become stronger, and in that way being able to participate in the self-care and collaborative and liberation movement that we want to strengthen in Colombia. Some organizations can definitely act directly or indirectly and support the initiatives financially, as helping the communities actors build their knowledge. That's another type of work that we can do. And these are just like general ideas that we want to leave in this group, hoping that that you will be able to explore and to implement them in your own movements and organizations. We know that self-care is here to stay. This is not a span of the moment or something fashionable that suddenly we're all talking about. This is something that is going to take it to stay, and definitely we have a huge responsibility as institutions, again, but also from the point of the government institutions to see how we are strengthened as enablers for this to happen. I always think that there is, that voice, that internal voice, that intuition that each one of us has when it comes to our bodies, when it comes to our decisions, is something that is at the basis of self-care initiatives. So it is time for that intuition, for that belief in ourselves, and that empowerment that we all have to come forward and start moving ahead as fast as possible so that self-care will be a reality for every country, for every person. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marta, for this intervention. I want to say we had some reactions on the chat from our participants where they mentioned they love the definition that you have mentioned on self-care and how self-care means that providers, health care providers and users' care are complementary to each other. And just in general, we have some positive reactions to that definition and way of understanding self-care beyond just having health practices, but also on the leading and agency that people have on their own sexual and reproductive experiences. And I will just like to highlight from your messages once again, something that both Oriana and you have in common, and is the idea that self-care is not a thing about the individual, it's about the connection and the ecosystems around the social structures. Is also about the role of social movements and the way in which these actions that we make can really be directed through gender transformation, liberation, and contra-systemic actions. So do that, we don't have currently any questions at the moment. I would like to open up for our next session of this event, in which we will have a small panel guided by Oriana Lopez, as you have already known, and then two wonderful panels that we have that will take us, and we will be honored to know their knowledge from social movement and collective grassroots initiatives around self-care and collective care. Just before we start, I would like to open for a video that we have right now. That is a song created by Las Parceras, a feminist abortion doulas collective in Colombia, that precisely talks about the role of the access to abortion and collective care in that process. So let's play the video, and then we can start with Oriana for the second part of our event.
Amando nuestras cuerpos, aborto libre, por la vida digna, aborto libre, acompañadas en la casa, aborto libre, pañuelo verde arriba, aborto libre, amor entre mujeres, aborto libre, conjurando los poderes, aborto libre, celebrando en Abyayala, aborto libre, y en la diáspora africana, aborto libre. Escuchaste sobre aborto, quítale el tono moral, pon el foco en los derechos, de eso vamos a hablar. Una mujer se piensa, decide sobre su cuerpo, no busques una excusa para hacerle el camino denso. Celebramos las mujeres que eligen su camino, fuertes, rebeldes, creando su destino. Se aman a sí mismas, rechazan el guión, deciden lo que quieren y lo ponen en acción. Mujeres poderosas juntas caminando, lo que crees no me importa, no me estés cuestionando. Estás mi cuerpo, mi territorio, mi revolución, expulsando, sacando y liberándome de tu opresión. Cuando abortamos es con alegría, la manifestación de nuestra autonomía. No fue con sufrimiento, mujeres con todo su color. Música abortera para revolucionarte, líricas del caos.
Thank you very much. This part will be in Spanish, so I'm going to be switching to Spanish. So remember, if you haven't selected your interpretation channel, we're going to be switching to Spanish right now, so you need to choose the language of your preference. Muchas gracias por el video. Justo queríamos empezar con este video para poder como tener el mood, ¿no? Como el modo de entrar en tono sobre la siguiente parte del panel, y me gusta mucho poder compartir este espacio y apoyar en la facilitación al lado de Verónica Vera de la Red Companera, de Juli Salamanca de la Liga de Salud Trans. Entonces, si pueden prender cámaras. Perdón, tiene razón, yo las tengo, eso, perfecto, las tengo perdidas en el Zoom. Bueno, pues ustedes ya saben y tienen las bios completas de cada una de nosotras en las páginas del evento, así es que sin escoger un orden en particular, yo les invitaría a Juli y a Vero que abran sus micrófonos, que los dejemos abiertos las tres durante esta parte de la sesión, para poder platicar, estar en un modo más relajado, tener una conversación. Por supuesto que necesitamos saber por qué están invitadas, es decir, conocer más sobre su trabajo, sobre la red y la iniciativa que están presentando ustedes. Entonces, pues las primeras preguntas es que ustedes pueden hacer una introducción de qué es la Liga de Salud Trans, de qué es la Red Compañera, de cuál es el trabajo que hacen. Si ustedes desde sus colectivas ya tienen como decidido cuál es la relación que ven entre el autocuidado y el cuidado colectivo, cuáles son los principales retos, tanto los que enfrentan y que hacen razón de la existencia de sus iniciativas, como los retos que tienen ya ahora que están formadas estas iniciativas. Quiero decir que me da, no sé, hace todo el sentido del mundo que sean estas dos iniciativas las que se estén presentando el día de hoy, así es que, ¿quién quiere empezar? Empezamos alfabéticamente.
¿Puedo arrancar yo? ¿Cómo están? ¿Qué tal? Muchas gracias a todas y todos los que están aquí y quienes nos acompañan. Soy Verónica Vera, soy de la Red Compañera, que es la red feminista de acompañantes en aborto de América Latina y el Caribe. Nosotras somos una articulación regional de organizaciones, de redes, de colectivas. Digo esto porque no todas las organizaciones que estamos agrupadas en la Red Compañera somos iguales, sino hay distintas formas como de activar. Somos colectivas y redes feministas y lesbofeministas que acompañamos a mujeres, a niñas y a otras personas a abortar de manera segura.
Perdón, un segundo. Sí, un segundo porque no está funcionando la traducción.
Ah, ya.
Ok. Si quieres empezar
¿De nuevo?
Para que te puedan traducir, porque nadie estaba escuchando en inglés tu presentación. Gracias.
Nada, lo que decía es que soy Verónica Vera de la Red Compañera, que es la red feminista latinoamericana y caribeña de acompañantes en aborto, que nosotras somos una articulación de redes colectivas y organizaciones en distintos países. Actualmente somos 23 grupos que conformamos esta red y estamos en 17 países. Lo que hace y lo que nos juntó como Red Compañera es primero nuestro modo político de entender el acompañamiento feminista en abortos, y este modo político es justamente respetando la vida, la salud y las decisiones de las mujeres y las personas con posibilidad de abortar, que damos respuestas rápidas, que no burocratizamos la experiencia de aborto y que acompañamos con respeto total hacia sus decisiones y reconociendo la autonomía y fortaleza que cada mujer y cada persona que aborta tiene. Entonces, lo que hacemos también o buscamos hacer juntas es disputar los saberes de la medicina más hegemónica, colonial, y producir conocimiento desde este lugar situado de acompañar abortos en el aquí y ahora, en contextos en donde las leyes o las políticas son restrictivas o nos impiden abortar en la legalidad. Y también en contextos en donde existen leyes y políticas un poco más abiertas, en donde quizás el aborto está despenalizado o es legal, pero que son limitadas y no permiten el acceso para todas las personas. Y por último, algo que también hacemos es justamente acompañarnos a acompañar. En español hay una palabra que es del feminismo centroamericano, más comunitario, que se llama acuerparnos. Entonces, ponemos el cuerpo juntas para buscar, ¿no es cierto?, esta posibilidad de que ninguna mujer y ninguna persona que necesita abortar se quede sin hacerlo. Entonces, queremos trascender, ir más allá de lo posible. Este es como lo que nos juntó especialmente, hacer un cuerpo colectivo, un cuerpo común que nos acompañe y que sea acompañante de nuestras decisiones. Entonces, eso como para presentar a la Red Compañera.
Muchísimas gracias, Vero. Juli, por favor, te recuerdo nada más eso, como ¿qué está haciendo la Liga de Salud Trans? Que nos expliques un poco para comprender cómo ven ustedes la relación entre el autocuidado y el cuidado colectivo y qué desafíos se enfrentan desde antes o ahora.
Hola, ¿ahí me escuchan bien?
Súper bien. Te escuchamos bien.
Ya, perdona, las escuchaba. Bueno, mi nombre es Juli Salamanca, hago parte de la Liga de Salud Trans. Muchísimas gracias por la invitación. La Liga de Salud Trans es un sueño de movilización, transformación y empoderamiento en el cual nos dimos cuenta en Colombia que los saberes, las experiencias y conocimientos de las personas trans tradicionalmente han sido omitidos o no han sido tenidos en cuenta. Un día estábamos varias activistas, varias organizaciones trans hablando sobre las diferentes violencias que sufríamos al intentar navegar el sistema de salud en Colombia, y uno de los sentimientos que más estaba en el encuentro, que todas las activistas y las organizaciones trans hablaban, que sentían cuando trataban de acceder al sistema de salud, era la rabia que nos producía enfrentarnos a violencias, a barreras de acceso para poder acceder a nuestro derecho a la salud. Y fue esa rabia la que nos impulsó a construir lo que hoy es la Liga de Salud Trans. La Liga de Salud Trans utiliza toda esa rabia como motor de lucha para agruparnos y construir un proyecto que pretende, por un lado, acompañarnos entre pares, entre personas trans, para poder navegar un sistema de salud que históricamente se ha negado a reconocernos, a reconocer nuestras identidades, a reconocer nuestras construcciones, y que ha sido un sistema de salud totalmente prejuicioso y lleno de estigmas sobre las identidades trans. Entonces, por un lado, queríamos acompañarnos entre nosotras, como lo hemos hecho por muchos años las organizaciones trans, pero por otro lado también queríamos seguir construyendo evidencia científica, que nuestro conocimiento, el que producimos todos los días en los territorios, acompañando a nuestros pares cuando necesitan una atención médica, cuando necesitan acceder a un proceso hormonal, cuando tienen preguntas sobre cómo iniciar su construcción identitaria, que este conocimiento fuera totalmente reconocido y empezáramos a construir evidencia científica. Entonces, lo que queremos, y esta apuesta de la Liga, es que conjunto a los prestadores del área de la salud, queremos construir un sistema de salud amigable, un sistema de salud en Colombia que entienda las necesidades de las personas trans. ¿Y cómo se puede hacer? Escuchando a las personas trans, entendiendo que las necesidades de las personas trans no son iguales y que lo más importante acá es escuchar a las personas trans para poder empezar a hablar de un sistema diferencial, de cómo hacemos para transformar y hacer un sistema más amigable con las personas trans.
Muchas gracias a las dos. Bueno, pues, Juli, si quieres, si puedes, dejar tu cámara abierta, porque ahora estas preguntas son también para las dos. Una es saber, pues, uno, como, ¿cuáles para ustedes son los principales retos que existen para poder seguir ampliando, seguir permitiendo que existan estas prácticas de autocuidado y cuidado colectivo? ¿Y qué podríamos pedir a las demás organizaciones, a los demás movimientos, a las instituciones para poder continuar con el trabajo que están haciendo, para apoyarlo? No solo dejarlo que continúe, sino al contrario, fortalecerlo, aportar, de qué manera podemos contribuir, de las organizaciones que están aquí presentes, de los donantes, del gobierno, qué se puede hacer para poder fortalecerles en estas iniciativas.
Puedo empezar yo. Creo que efectivamente la posibilidad de articularnos es una posibilidad que responde a unas condiciones. Entonces, nosotras como Red Compañera veníamos trabajando y nos conocíamos como distintas grupas o colectivas en países de manera aislada, ¿no? Entonces estaban las socorristas en Argentina, las parceras en Colombia, las comadres, que es la colectiva de la que yo soy parte en Ecuador. En México había varias colectivas, pero nos conocíamos hace mucho, pero no habíamos tenido la posibilidad de trabajar juntas por distintas cosas. Creo que una de las primeras cosas que yo podría decir que es como para fortalecer este tipo de espacios es posibilitar la articulación y apoyar estos procesos. Yo creo que nosotras pudimos articularnos a partir de que tuvimos la posibilidad de hacer 2 encuentros físicos, de vernos, de ponernos un rostro, de conocernos, de lograr saber cuál es la apuesta política de las compañeras en Centroamérica, cuál es la apuesta política de las compañeras de Bolivia y de todas las que estamos articuladas en red. Entonces, a veces la falta de encuentro, la falta de recursos para posibilitar estos encuentros es algo que no se toma en consideración para que estas redes sigamos existiendo. Yo diría que ese es un paso 1. También diría que efectivamente el cuidado colectivo y este paraguas que nos dan las redes regionales, al menos en la Red Compañera, lo que nos permite es que las redes que somos más públicas, por ejemplo, como las de Ecuador, las de Argentina, las de México, que tenemos otros contextos políticos en los que hablar de aborto no implica una sentencia de cárcel o no implica una persecución política tan fuerte, lo que hacemos es apañar o acompañar a las otras redes que están en contextos más complejos como el centroamericano, en el que efectivamente ellas no pueden ser del todo públicas, pero les apañamos y nos acompañamos justamente a entender posicionamientos públicos como red regional que cuidan a las otras y que permiten que las otras también alcen su voz en medio de todas las dificultades que tienen. Entonces yo diría que eso es algo que es importante, replicar lo que las redes regionales están construyendo, replicar la información que estamos socializando y demás. Creo que algo que también es importante y que se puede hacer es reconocer las experiencias, la experiencia situada que tenemos como redes de acompañantes y la experiencia efectiva que tenemos logrando que los abortos se puedan realizar en casa, que las mujeres y otras personas que abortan accedan a todos los recursos, a toda la información, a todos los insumos y a todo lo que es necesario para que tengan un proceso de aborto que esté libre de violencias, que esa es como la búsqueda principal que tenemos, que esté libre de obstáculos, que esté libre de burocracias, que esté libre de prejuicios y sobre todo que sea una decisión que es acompañada, porque el acompañamiento feminista lo que pone en el centro es justamente ir con ella, encontrando qué herramientas tiene ella o tiene la persona que decide abortar y qué puede poner a disposición para lograr que este aborto se lleve a cabo de la manera más cuidadosa. Nosotras lo que proponemos es trascender la noción de seguridad, de que el aborto debe ser seguro únicamente, sino poner en el centro que el aborto debe ser cuidado y que para esto es necesario que tenga ciertas condiciones. Entonces, diría que hay mucho trabajo que pueden hacer como instituciones o como organizaciones de salud, pero creo que reconocer la experiencia que ya tenemos como acompañantes como una experiencia que es segura, que existe, que está funcionando. Por ejemplo, algo que pasó en este año de pandemia o en el primer año de pandemia fue que las redes de acompañantes nos visibilizamos como una iniciativa sumamente importante en medio de un sistema, digamos, o de sistemas de salud pública colapsadas. Entonces, para muchas resultamos quizás la única posibilidad de interrumpir un embarazo en contextos en los que ir a hacerte una ecografía o ir al centro de salud o ir al hospital era imposible. Entonces, yo creo que reconocer estas prácticas es un primer paso también para que podamos acercar nuestro trabajo como acompañantes al trabajo que sostienen otro tipo de sistemas, otro tipo de organizaciones que están más en la institucionalidad. Entonces, podría dar ahí una serie de ideas más, pero creo que por ahora me quedo con esto.
Muchas gracias, Vero. Justo, Juli, y ahí dame un segundo, porque quiero preguntar, justo Megan Christofield hace una pregunta que es, ¿qué es lo que estamos pidiéndole al sistema, ¿no? O sea, ¿de qué forma hay cambios tangibles o prácticos por los cuales ustedes estén movilizando que podrían ayudar más al autocuidado? Y ahorita, Vero, tú mencionas esta parte de, más allá de que el aborto sea seguro físicamente, queremos que el aborto sea acompañado. Entonces, mi pregunta es, ¿qué tanto el sistema puede hacer algo más allá, ¿no? O sea, como de qué forma, o sea, el sistema del gobierno nos va a proveer abortos feministas, ¿no? O sea, como de que nos va a acoger, va a tener una política de cuidados el gobierno. Y entonces, sí, lo puedes responder, Vero, o Juli, también tú, como ahorita que respondas también la pregunta, como de qué forma crees que el sistema, sin un acompañamiento de ustedes, podría hacerse cargo de verdad acoger, arropar las necesidades específicas de la comunidad trans para proveer los servicios. O sea, como si creen que es una cuestión de hacer modificaciones en las políticas, si creen que es una cuestión de colaborar, si creen que es una cuestión que va a ser posible en unos años, no sé, como ahí lo dejo como más abierto a ustedes para que puedan tomar y pueden desafiar y pueden decirme o sea, como pueden ir contra el sistema completamente o pueden abrazarlo, son libres, digan. Juli, ¿quieres ir?
Sí, pues varias cosas. Yo creo que las organizaciones aborteras y las organizaciones trans llevamos acompañando y materializando el concepto de autocuidado hace mucho tiempo, muchísimo tiempo, y sin que esta palabra se haya vuelto como una moda, ¿no? Porque en estos tiempos también creo que hay que problematizar la palabra autocuidado, porque autocuidado hoy en nuestra sociedad muchas veces es malinterpretado con individualismo, con qué me hace a mí estar bien y tranquila. Y entonces por eso cuando tú hablabas, Oriana, de la relación tan fuerte que hay con el capitalismo y con el paso y con la línea tan delgada que hay en esta concepción de autocuidado. Y yo creo que uno de los retos más grandes que tenemos las personas trans cuando hablamos de autocuidado, de cuidado colectiva y del sistema, es que el sistema sigue hablando de nuestras necesidades sin escucharnos. Entonces, para el sistema, lo que necesitan las trans es hormonas y tetas. Todas las trans, lo único que necesitamos es hormonas, llenémoslas de hormonas, pero llenémoslas de hormonas sin información. Y todavía tienen esta construcción o esta idea de las construcciones totalmente binarias, que los tránsitos tienen un inicio y un fin, que son lineales, no que podemos ser y seguir siendo y transformándonos y construyéndonos, y le sigue metiendo el imaginario a las familias, a los niños y niñas trans, que solo hay un modelo de ser mujer y solo hay un modelo de ser hombre. Y creo que ese es de los retos más grandes que hemos tenido las organizaciones trans, la Liga de Salud Trans, y es cómo romper ese estereotipo, cómo enseñarle al sistema que hay millones de formas de ser mujer, que hay millones de formas de ser hombre, que hay millones de formas de ser persona, y que para estas millones de formas de ser hay unas particularidades en la atención del sistema de salud. Y creo que ese es como el gran reto, y me emociona que en este panel realmente estemos Verónica, que han trabajado muchísimo en todo el tema del aborto, y que estemos nosotras de una organización trans, porque eso es hablar de autonomía de los cuerpos, eso es hablar sobre mi cuerpo decido yo decido cómo quiero construir la mujer que siempre soñé, o las personas que deciden construirse. Entonces yo sí creo que, para ir cerrando, primero necesitamos realmente problematizar la palabra autocuidado. Por eso a mí me gusta más hablar de cuidado colectivo, porque hablar de cuidado colectivo también quiere decir que primero sí estoy yo, pero al decir que primero estoy yo, también estoy aceptando y le estoy apuntando a la transformación del conjunto, a cómo transformo esta sociedad que es tan transfóbica, tan misógena, que no quiere vernos a las mujeres libres. Y ahí creo que es súper importante que empecemos también las activistas feministas, porque hablar también de cuidado colectivo es decir, hey, hoy no te puedo acompañar porque tengo cosas personales que hacer. Hoy estoy mamada y no puedo defender los derechos de nadie porque me quiero quedar en mi casa llorando. Y creo que eso ha sido un problema tanto como del movimiento de mujeres, y es que nos han dicho que no podemos sentir, que no podemos gritar, que tenemos que estar al servicio siempre. Y hablar de cuidado colectivo es que antes de estar para todo el mundo, primero hay que sanar. Por eso creo que al momento de reflexionar sobre el concepto de cuidado colectivo, también no lo podemos romantizar. Y no podemos creer que las organizaciones aborteras o las organizaciones trans vamos a estar siempre. Claro, vamos a estar ahí siempre, pero necesitamos unas condiciones dignas para estar. Y en cuanto a la pregunta de qué se puede hacer, creo que primero hay que escucharnos, porque muchas veces se generan políticas públicas, se generan cambios en el sistema de salud sin escuchar a las organizaciones que llevamos mucho tiempo, que tenemos experiencia. Y segundo, creo que hay que hablar de plata, porque para que todo esto continúe, las organizaciones tenemos que tener autonomía económica. Sin autonomía económica, todo esto también se quedará pues en lo lindo, en lo romántico, pero pues sin plata también no se puede seguir avanzando en un futuro donde las activistas, donde las organizaciones sociales puedan seguir haciendo su trabajo. Perdón, me extendí muchísimo.
No, Juli, está perfecto. Creo que nos mantienes a todas en la orillita del asiento. Así es que muchas gracias. Pero no sé si tú quieres profundizar sobre esta parte de las cuestiones prácticas que le podemos pedir al sistema, o si no le podemos pedir, quemamos el sistema, no sé.
Bueno, primero quisiera decir que para nosotras, igual como Red Compañera, el autocuidado no puede existir sin una noción de los cuidados colectivos. Justamente como ya decía Juli, creo que ahí hay un encuentro. Y algo que nos parece sumamente importante es que la noción de cuidados colectivos tiene que ver con esta posibilidad de acompañar en red. O sea, la Red Compañera es una articulación de grupos que ya están en sus propios contextos y propios países acompañando en red. Entonces, para nosotras el activismo alrededor del acompañamiento es esa posibilidad de que haya otras a tu alrededor que cuando tú efectivamente no puedas, no quieras, no estés como con las fuerzas o la fortaleza de hacer o de acompañar un aborto, siempre haya otras que acompañen o apañen este momento de tu vida para que tampoco esta mujer o esta persona que está buscando abortar se quede sin una respuesta, porque justamente eso es algo que le hacemos, nosotras hacemos distinto al sistema, y es que no queremos que las mujeres o las personas que aborten se queden sin una respuesta en el momento en el que lo requieren. Entonces, por eso es esta apuesta de lo colectivo colectivo, de no ser una sola acompañando a miles, sino ser muchas acompañantes poniendo nuestro tiempo, poniendo nuestra pasión, poniendo nuestra disposición también en este lugar de lograr que los abortos se ejecuten, lograr que los abortos sean posibles y lograr que estos abortos sean cuidados. Entonces, yo quería retomar ese día. Y algo que justamente con la Red Compañera conversábamos y decíamos es que para nosotras la institucionalidad, digamos, no siempre va a lograr responder a nuestras solicitudes, justamente porque las instituciones no necesariamente son instituciones feministas, entonces tendrían que transformarse de raíz, y donde no necesariamente existe personal feminista que está pensando estos temas desde este lugar. Entonces, lo que nos parece esencial justamente es pensar la posibilidad de articulación con los sistemas más formales, pero desde este lugar en el que las acompañantes, por ejemplo, podemos acompañar a un aborto en la institucionalidad y lograr saltar estas brechas, estos obstáculos que todavía están presentes ahí. Entonces, nosotras lo que sí vemos es una posibilidad como de articulación, pero que efectivamente va a responder a un trabajo sostenido entre las que estamos por fuera de esta institucionalidad y un trabajo de hormigas, ¿no? De ir paso a paso transformándola y de ir paso a paso generando cambios. Entonces, algo que también es importante decir es que nosotras estamos acompañando abortos que se producen dentro de los sistemas de salud más formales, pero esto como una respuesta a nuestra decisión política de no abandonar a las mujeres y a otras personas que deciden abortar y de no dejarlas solas enfrentándose a un sistema que cada vez que hacen una solicitud les dice que no, o que les pone trabas, o que le pone obstáculos. Entonces, yo creo que es ahí como la posibilidad de articulación, como ya decía Juli, creo que en esa posibilidad de que nos escuchen a quienes estamos ejerciendo, tratando de ejercer un derecho, y de que estos obstáculos que nosotras identificamos, o estas vivencias que fueron violentas o que son dolorosas, se pongan sobre la mesa para construir las políticas públicas, las respuestas que dan. Nuevamente, es tan sencillo como volver a poner en el centro a las mujeres, a las personas que abortan, a volver a poner en el centro nuestras necesidades, nuestras demandas también. Entonces, creo que esos son como cosas sumamente importantes que le demandamos al sistema, que le exigimos al sistema y que estamos trabajando para que suceda, porque las acompañantes no queremos estar como aisladas, queremos estar articulando, pero en un sistema que sea y tenga la posibilidad también de transformarse y demás, pero también queremos estar existiendo. Nosotras, algo que es importante decir es que el acompañamiento feminista en aborto llegó para quedarse. O sea, nosotras no creemos que acompañar aborto sea un mientras tanto, ¿no? Como pasa en Argentina, el aborto es legal, pero hay muchas que se están quedando por fuera de esa legalidad, porque siempre lo legal te impone límites, ¿no es cierto? No va a lograr estar disponible para todo lo que queremos y todo lo que soñamos, y ahí es cuando es tan importante el feminismo y el feminismo que acompaña. Entonces, eso es lo que podría sumar a lo que nos preguntaste.
Muchas gracias, Vero, muchas gracias, Juli. Justamente, bueno, tenemos una participación desde Benín, que es de Beranger Tosu, que está justo como cuestionando como de qué manera se puede entrelazar el trabajo que se está haciendo desde este tipo de iniciativas en América Latina con Benín, ¿no? O sea, cómo llevar allá también, y yo estoy segura de que en Benín debe de haber mujeres organizadas, personas de la disidencia sexual organizadas, que están ya haciendo un tipo de acompañamiento, ¿no? Un tipo de asistencia. Y creo que lo que pasa es esto que dice Vero, como una cosa es pasar de que la gente naturalmente, porque hay mucha gente que desde la empatía apoya a otras, desde el conocimiento de lo que ya atravesó, apoya a otras para abortar, para tener acceso a métodos, para navegar los sistemas de salud, para acompañarse en los procesos de identidad, ¿no? O sea, como en ese compartir y en esa empatía de comunidad, pero una cosa es hacerlo de forma organizada, ¿no? Como eso ya es un paso siguiente, que es armarse de estructura, armarse de una decisión decisión como mucho más estructurada de decir, esto voy a dedicarle tantas horas a la semana, tantas horas al día, ¿no? Entonces, creo que podemos permanecer en contacto. Me parece que en la página del evento están nuestros contactos, nuestros correos electrónicos, Beranger, para poder continuar en la conversación y poder ver. Pero creo que Benín o cualquier otro país, lo que es importante es saber primero de tu propio contexto quién está haciendo ese trabajo y de qué forma fortalecerlo, porque a veces vemos, y a mí me ha pasado, ¿no? Como veo unas cosas que hacen en Líbano y digo, wow, y me súper sorprenden, y después me doy cuenta de que en México hay varias organizaciones, iniciativas, colectivas que están haciendo un trabajo similar y que podría conectarles como una forma de fortalecerles, pero también simplemente podría conocer más y promocionar el trabajo de lo local, y creo que ahí hay una cosa muy concreta de la localización, ¿no? Como de este trabajo de ir, estamos en eventos como estos que son más globales o más internacionales, y de qué forma podemos recuperar lo que está pasando en otros países, de qué forma podemos aprender de ello y de qué forma podemos ir construyendo movimientos más transnacionales y reconociendo y fortaleciendo siempre desde lo local. Bueno, quisiera saber, creo que ustedes ya han dicho mucho de por qué tiene que ver con la autonomía corporal y la liberación, sus iniciativas y el trabajo específico de aborto en general y trans, ¿no? O sea, como cuál es ese proceso de entender que los no binarios, de romper el binario. Pero yo les preguntaría, no a la Liga de Salud Trans, no a la Red Compañera, sino a Vero y a Juli, ¿cómo ven ustedes sus iniciativas en términos de qué tan transformadoras del género o de los estereotipos de género, de las relaciones de género ven? O sea, como creen que se podría hacer más, creen que se está haciendo suficientemente transgresor ya y estamos rompiendo todas las nociones de género, o creen que podríamos seguir trabajando y desarticulando nuestro sistema binario a través de sus iniciativas y el trabajo colaborativo con otras aliadas, redes.
Pues yo primero quisiera agregar algo, y es que sí, como que las organizaciones comunitarias hemos funcionado y hemos existido sin la institucionalidad, ¿sí? Hemos materializado el concepto de cuidado colectivo sin la institucionalidad. Y un ejemplo muy claro de esto fue la pandemia. La pandemia nos deja un mensaje muy bonito, y es que visibilizó el trabajo de las organizaciones comunitarias en las calles, que no es nuevo, que no es de hace un año, que lleva años trabajando en las calles en el cuidado colectivo, ¿sí? Yo miraba en toda América Latina el trabajo de las organizaciones trans cumpliendo una necesidad que no estaba cumpliendo el Estado, y era alimentar a las mujeres trans que en tiempos de pandemia no podían comprar un alimento. Y organizaciones trans que no tienen grandes recursos, pero haciendo mil y un cosas, lograron llegar a darle respuesta a muchísimas mujeres trans en todos sus territorios. Entonces creo que es un momento, en este momento necesitamos también preguntarnos, y es como, no preguntarnos, sino es como llenarnos de fuerza para aceptar todo el gran trabajo que hemos hecho, porque a veces creo que las organizaciones comunitarias no dimensionamos el trabajo, y que la institucionalidad nos necesita realmente para la construcción de políticas públicas, y creo que eso es muy importante. Y respecto a la pregunta, yo creo que la tarea va lenta en toda América Latina en cómo podemos seguir rompiendo estos estereotipos de género, como si a la gente le cuesta hablar de personas trans, imagínense cómo le costará hablar ahora de personas no binarias, de que queremos construir un sistema de salud en el cual se reconozca la persona, que tenga en cuenta una atención integral, que tenga en cuenta un sistema en el cual se reconozca las diferentes necesidades de cada cuerpo. Entonces yo sí creo que la tarea va lento, pero con el trabajo de organizaciones trans que se están dando la pelea por el respeto a las identidades y los cuerpos de todos los seres humanos y de todos los seres, hay una hay un fuerte trabajo y creo que la meta se ve lejos, pero se ve. Al menos, creo que hace unos años uno ni siquiera veía la meta. Ahora creo que con este nuevo, gracias al feminismo también nos hemos dado cuenta que en nuestro cuerpo no hay nada malo, ¿sí? Y creo que hablar de politizar el derecho a la salud también es hablar de aceptar y querer nuestros cuerpos, porque nos habían enseñado a odiar nuestro cuerpo, a decir que no está bien ser una persona trans, que obligatoriamente tenía que mutilar, que tenía que quitar, que tenía que ponerme. Ahora creo que estas nuevas generaciones estamos entendiendo que nos estamos construyendo como queremos y que queremos un sistema de salud que respete, reconozca nuestras necesidades.
Creo que hay una parte muy importante que tiene que ver con el contexto, ¿no? Hay un contexto de, o sea, bueno, pero yo trabajamos mucho desde la justicia sexual y reproductiva en ese entendido, como hay un contexto que no te está brindando pues ciertas cosas necesarias, ¿no? Como hace rato que estabas diciendo, Juli, como creen que las personas trans solamente necesitan hormonas y tetas, yo diría, claro, y en general no están pensando en si tienen vivienda, si tienen trabajo, si tienen, ¿no? Si tienen educación, si tienen, y creo que eso es importante para todas las personas, qué tanto se están cumpliendo todas nuestras necesidades básicas, además de, pues, ¿no? O sea, no, o justo porque, o sea, esta parte como de estar marginalizado, de estar en los huecos de la sociedad, hace que no tengas acceso a vivienda, no tengas acceso a educación, no tengas acceso a empleo, o se busquen formas de discriminarte para quitarte esas cosas. Entonces, y que con la pandemia también, en México tenemos un observatorio de género justamente para revisar con la pandemia cuál era el impacto diferenciado por género y justamente ver qué estaba pasando con la población trans, con la población de mujeres, con los distintos tipos de poblaciones de mujeres y de mujeres trans, porque nos intersectan distintas formas bueno, distintas cuestiones de nuestra vida, ¿no? Entonces, también, y esas se traducen en formas de discriminación. Entonces, un poco nos gustaría, o sea, como terminar de entender, yo sé muy bien y cómo es el acompañamiento de aborto, entiendo que hace la Liga de Salud Trans, pero que nos cuenten un poco justo cómo entra, o sea, como para entrar en, quiero ser acompañante de aborto un día o quiero ser acompañante de los procesos de salud trans un día. ¿Qué es lo que hacen en concreto quienes forman parte de la Liga de Salud Trans, quienes forman parte de la Red Compañera? ¿De qué se trata acompañar abortos? ¿De qué se trata acompañar a alguien trans? Yo sé que es pues podrían hablar 24 horas sobre esto, pero si pueden darnos como un ejemplo como muy clarito para quienes están trabajando desde otros lugares para darse una mejor idea de cómo funciona.
Bueno, puedo empezar yo. Bueno, el acompañamiento feminista en un aborto, digamos, para nosotras es la posibilidad de que una mujer o una persona que tomó la decisión de abortar lleve a cabo su decisión más allá de las condiciones que existan en el contexto. Entonces, a pesar de que esté en un contexto en donde el aborto no sea legal en todos los casos, a pesar de que esté en un contexto donde esté criminalizado, entonces acompañar implica poner, digamos, los recursos amplios en las manos de las mujeres, poner también las decisiones amplias en las manos de las mujeres y otras personas que deciden abortar, pero también implica aprender a escuchar desde este lugar de la escucha activa, ¿no? Escuchar qué necesidades tiene esta persona, porque abortar no solo es el acto de interrumpir un embarazo, sino que está atravesado por muchas otras cosas, ¿no? Implica también reconocer qué significa esta experiencia para esta mujer o persona que aborta y ir poco a poco con ella o con ella desanudando todo este proceso para que sea un proceso que se viva sí, como un derecho, pero sobre todo con autonomía, libre de violencias, el aborto como una experiencia que es una experiencia cotidiana. Y para nosotras también acompañar implica de alguna manera la posibilidad de que las mujeres y las personas que nos buscan, digamos, para interrumpir sus embarazos, se vean con otras mujeres y con otras personas que también buscan interrumpir sus embarazos para que reconozcan que el aborto no es algo que les está pasando a ellas en este momento concreto de su vida únicamente, sino que hay muchas que necesitan y quieren abortar. Entonces, que sepan que el acompañamiento no es a ellas porque son ellas, sino que lo que buscamos nosotras de alguna manera es que sea un derecho y que todas las personas puedan acceder a él sin barreras, sin plazos, sin causales. ¿Cómo lo hacemos en concreto? Es básicamente en la mayoría de países hay líneas de información, por ejemplo, hay un primer contacto, un correo electrónico, una red social en donde las personas que quieren abortar nos escriben, luego una de las acompañantes de esta red se contacta con ellas, le brinda información sobre aborto seguro con medicamentos, le brinda información sobre cómo acceder a los medicamentos de manera segura en los países en donde no es posible hacerlo, o sea, como acercamos todos estos recursos a las personas que deciden abortar, está con ella a veces físicamente o a veces virtualmente o vía telemáticamente, respondiendo dudas y preguntas, sosteniendo la ansiedad que puede dar, ¿no? Abortar en casa en algunos momentos, resolviendo cualquier cosa que quien aborta necesita en ese momento, está disponible durante todo este tiempo, en el durante el aborto y posteriormente lo que también tenemos son espacios de reflexión que pueden ser colectivos, por ejemplo, para encontrarnos entre personas que abortan, entre mujeres que abortan, o espacios como de reflexión individuales, en donde ponemos en común la experiencia de abortar, apalabramos, ponemos en palabras eso que no necesariamente se habla. Entonces, este es como el modo más común de abortar, acompañada quizás, lo he reducido mucho, pero en cada país es distinto, ¿no? Cada red tiene su propia forma de acompañar, pero básicamente es eso, ¿no? Y yo creo que esta acción directa, como ya decía, de poder hacer posible la decisión de las mujeres y de las personas que buscan abortar y de poder hacerlo posible juntas, tanto las que acompañamos como nosotras que somos los acompañantes, es algo que rompe con el sistema patriarcal que quiere forzarnos a la maternidad, que quiere decirnos que el único mandato que tenemos las mujeres y las personas como es ser madres, que esa es nuestra única posibilidad. Entonces, creo que por eso es una apuesta finalmente antisistémica, pero yo digo que para las acompañantes, el hecho de que las mujeres puedan también llevar a cabo su decisión libre de violencia, libre de estigma, libre de culpa, también es esperanzador. O sea, ver que una mujer que en su vida vive tantas violencias, está atravesada por tanta precariedad, que una persona que muchas veces no tiene la posibilidad de decidir nada porque la violencia está presente en su entorno, pero que tiene una decisión tan firme y autónoma de abortar y que puede hacerlo posible junto a nosotras, porque no es gracias a nosotras, sino junto a nosotras como acompañantes, es esperanzador y obviamente que nos cuida también a las redes de acompañantes porque nos da esperanza de que lo que estamos haciendo cambia y transforma. Entonces, por ahí iría como contando mis respuestas.
Muchísimas gracias, Vero. Juli, cuéntanos más específico sobre la Liga de Salud Trans.
Bueno, la Liga de la Salud Trans en este momento lo que está haciendo es formando y capacitando a personas trans en temas específicos de salud que les permita a estas personas trans acompañar en los procesos de tránsitos a otras personas trans. Lo que queremos en la Liga de Salud es crear un modelo de acompañamiento sensible entre personas trans, que podamos navegar el sistema de salud sin enfrentarnos a un sistema que discrimina, que violenta y estigmatiza. Por otro lado, la Liga está generando permanentemente diagnósticos sobre rutas de atención, sobre acceso al derecho a la salud para personas trans. Se está volviendo en una red técnica que también quiere construir políticas públicas en materia de acceso a los derechos de las personas trans. Esta liga lo que quiere y como el plus de esta liga es que todo el conocimiento está saliendo de las vivencias de las personas trans, porque no hay nadie más experto para hablar de la salud trans que nosotras, nosotros y nosotros mismos, porque hablamos de nuestros cuerpos. Entonces, por un lado, estamos creando todo un modelo de acompañamiento sensible con personas trans que se han capacitado y están construyendo este modelo, sino también estamos generando recomendaciones de política pública y estamos teniendo un acercamiento con los profesionales del área de la salud, porque sabemos que esta relación ha sido una relación problemática, que muchos profesionales del área de la salud no tienen la información necesaria, que muchos otros tienen prejuicios y estigmas. Y lo que pretendemos en la Liga de la Salud Trans es hacer un proceso de paz. Es decir, vengan, nos necesitamos, construyamos juntos este sistema con el cual soñamos y queremos.
Muchas gracias a las dos. Creo que rescatan mucho sobre, y creo que desmitifican un poco sobre el trabajo que se hace desde el lado comunitario, desde base, ¿no? O sea, no estamos haciendo únicamente, pero que es muy necesario, el proceso individual de cada caso, sino que además se está produciendo evidencia, se están produciendo recomendaciones, tanto para la despenalización del aborto y para cómo se accede al aborto, para justamente para cómo se accede a la salud, cómo se están atendiendo las necesidades específicas para las personas trans y para las personas que están atravesando un aborto. Creo que esa parte es muy importante, como de rescatar que desde acá también hay evidencia científica, que la evidencia científica no solo está en las grandes instituciones como la Organización Mundial de la Salud, que no solo está allá, sino que se tiene que salir de la vida concreta de las personas, ¿no? Entonces, muchísimas gracias a Vero y a Juli. Para mí es muy importante en un momento que estamos viviendo de los feminismos, en donde a veces creemos que es incompatible ciertas luchas con otras. Creo que esto demuestra que pues nuestras luchas son bastante cercanas, que estamos luchando por un mismo mundo donde las personas no estén teniendo menos acceso a sus derechos por ser de un género a otro o por tener unos genitales que otros, ¿no? O sea, que eso no sea algo que nos defina y que podamos construir en el futuro la multiplicidad de géneros que se nos ocurran y que la imaginación sea nuestro límite para cómo nos expresamos, cómo nos identificamos y cómo vivimos y ejercemos nuestras sexualidades. Entonces, muchísimas gracias a Juli, a Vero. Vamos a ir con un video justamente de la Liga de Salud Trans. Empezamos con un video abortero, así es que vamos a terminar con el video de ustedes. Y ahorita entonces volvemos. Espero que... No sé si tengo que dar la instrucción en inglés. Ahí está, muy bien.
Somos luz y somos sombra. Somos luz y somos sombra. Somos luz y somos sombras. En la oscuridad se construye todo lo que en la luz se disfruta. Somos luz y somos sombra. Energía masculina y energía femenina. Energía femenina y energía masculina. ¿Qué es lo natural? Femenino y masculino. Un regalo arrebatado.
Ahí termina, Juli.
No, todavía sigue.
¿Podemos poner un poco más el video? No sabemos si probablemente fue la conexión con...
Y somos sombra. Y somos sombra. Energía masculina y energía femenina. Energía femenina y energía masculina. ¿Qué es lo natural? Femenino y masculino. Un regalo arrebatado. Femenino y masculino. Una forma de control. Femenino y masculino como estado de opresión. Femenino y masculino. Una forma de violencia. Masculino y femenino. El piso de un territorio en disputa. ¿Dijiste disputa o un barrio de putas? Sí, un barrio de putas, territorio en disputa. Es el rectángulo, un estado paralelo al estado. Quien respete las normas puede vivir sanamente y segura. ¿Segura? ¿Sentirse segura? Sí, sentirse segura, pero también violentada. Sentirse segura, pero también estafada. Sentirse segura y al mismo tiempo asesinada. Libre, pero a la vez enjaulada. Amada y también timada. Deseada y exterminada. sobre todo deseada, deseada en lo oculto, deseada en la sombra, deseada en lo clandestino, deseada en el closet, deseada en el fuego que te mata y te consume. Asesino el motivo de mi deseo. Si no hay cuerpo, no hay deseo. Dime un lugar donde sientas miedo. Nómbrame un cuerpo que te dé miedo y al mismo tiempo deseo. Una emoción que te lleve al miedo. Una experiencia que te huela a miedo. Porque lo natural es la transformación. El cuerpo como territorio. El cuerpo como estado. El cuerpo que se descompone. Cuerpo que se reconfigura, que renace. Cuerpos habitados y deshabitados. Cuerpos en alquiler. Cuerpos esclavizados. Cuerpos para hacer memoria. Memoria para crear. Memoria para cambiar. Hacer memoria para no morir. Hacer memoria para resistir. Memoria para recordar. Memoria para denunciar. Hacer memoria para reparar. Hacer memoria para emancipar. Para sanar. También para bailar, gritar y cantar. Hacer memoria para sobrevivir. Para poder nacer. Pero también para poder morir. En paz, por fin. Hacer memoria para trascender. Hacer memoria para transformar. Ven, marcha trans, haz memoria. Marcha para despertar. Despierta para cambiar. Marcha para reivindicar. Para resignificar el barrio. Marcha para decirle a nuestras hermanas que no las olvidamos, que viven en nuestras luchas. Que podrán cortar todas las flores, pero nunca podrán detener la primavera, que entenderá todo el mundo porque somos malas y podemos ser peores. Marcha para escandalizar la vecina evangélica. Sabemos lo mucho que nos detesta. Es un respiro de justicia por un minuto. Esta es la fiesta de las galas, la gala de las galas. Esta es la fiesta de la rara, de la puta, de la ñera, de la loca, de la pegantera, de la bazuquera, de la acidosa. Este es un homenaje travesti al único territorio donde nos sentimos seguras. ¿Seguras? Seguras entre comillas. ¿Segura? ¿Saben qué es lo único seguro? Es que yo te amo, pero más me amo yo. Y si no me amas así, finalmente eso no me importa. Esto se trata de mí.
Wow. Es muy bello este video. Muchísimas gracias, Juli, por compartirlo con todos nosotros. Y bueno, vamos a pasar a la siguiente parte. Así es que ahora podemos pasar a inglés. Muchísimas gracias, Vero y Juli. Now I would like to introduce Colleen Daly, that's going to take us to the third and final part of the session. Colleen, are you there? Hi, Colleen. How are you?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. I'm really excited to hear about you and to be learning from you.
Oh, I'm thrilled. Thank you all so much for letting me be a part of this. And I just wanted to say thank you to all the folks that presented before me. Learning from you is absolutely incredible. And I'm just so grateful for all the work that you're doing. So thank you, thank you, thank you. So my name is Colleen Daly. I have dedicated myself to women and femmes, to making sure that women and femmes feel strong, capable, powerful in their bodies. It is incredibly important to me that self-defense be accessible to the folks that need it most. I think that so often when we talk about self-defense, it caters to white, cisgender, heterosexual men. When you walk into a self-defense facility, it tends to be 90%, if not more, that population. And that to me is a huge problem, because when we talk about the folks that experience violence, it's women, it's trans folks, it's non-binary folks, it's people of color, it's people without documents. The people that don't have access to this training are the ones that miss out on it. So Guerrera is geared towards ensuring that women and femmes have access to this training. And we're going to actually just jump in and do some of it. So I know that everybody wants to keep their screens off, which is fine. But it's much easier for me to interact with you all. Oh, hello, Nisha. It's much easier. Oh, hello, everyone. The more folks that have their screens on, the better. So I can see you, see what you're doing. We can interact. I will correct your form. I'm not going to call you out individually, but just like have a sense of how the group's doing. So the more folks that have their screens on, the better. I see a bold 10. So hopefully we inspire some other folks. So I really appreciate it. A couple things to keep in mind. Statistics suggest that upwards of 80%, and they're speaking about cis women, but then when we get into non-binary and trans women, we know that it's significantly larger, that up to 80%, if not more, of folks who take a self-defense class have experienced violence in some way prior to taking the training. So I want to remind you that if you have experienced violence, it is not your fault. It is always the fault of the perpetrator. And that's really, really important to continue to emphasize, that nothing that has happened to you in the past, nothing that happens to you in the future is your fault. And I think that so often self-defense training can get stuck in this cycle of, well, if this, then you should do this. And that's nonsense. Remember that whatever you've experienced, whatever you did in that moment is what you could have and should have done, and nobody can tell you differently. You're here, and that's all that matters. So while I will be providing techniques that we're going to talk about, understand that there's no right or wrong way, right? Violence and violence is tends to be a negative term, and I want us to see violence in this instance as a positive mechanism of holding bodily autonomy. We use violence against violence in this kind of situation to protect ourselves and those around us. So in a way, embracing violence as a means of holding and taking up space. But there's almost never a never or always in violence, right? Things are chaotic. So if I tell you, oh, well, this is how it should be done, that's nonsense. That's absolute nonsense. So just remember that it's more about concepts than actual techniques, if that makes sense. So the first and most important thing is to remember that nothing that's happened to you is your fault. Another rule that I've had to tweak it for the purposes of the professionalism of this group, is you're not allowed to apologize in my seminars. And I encourage you to avoid apologizing in your general life. And that is because we as women and femmes make ourselves smaller, and we make ourselves demure, and we acquiesce to the needs of others by apologizing. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be so bold, or, I'm sorry. I understand I shouldn't have asked for that promotion, or I'm sorry, I didn't understand, or I'm sorry, you can speak, right? We apologize to make space for other people. And this is all about taking up and owning space. So if you apologize for any reason other than, I have now two rules. We made up originally the rule was if you hit somebody in the face, you can apologize. Obviously that's not relevant here. But also if you misgender somebody, you're allowed to apologize. But those are the only two times you're allowed to apologize in my training. You have to yell, sorry, not sorry. It's not as gratifying as what my usual word is, but well, it's fine. Okay, so that's the foundation of what we're doing today. I also want you to remember that violence, as we talked about, can be triggering because we tend to see it as a negative. So putting ourselves into a violent space can be very difficult, either because we've experienced violence, we've been accused of executing violence when it hasn't happened. There's a number of reasons why violence can feel triggering. So I want you to take care of yourselves as we do this. And I encourage you to have both an external and an internal resource available to you at all times. So somebody that you can talk to is an excellent external resource. A really safe, profound memory is an internal resource. Does that make sense? So have a good external resources and a good internal resource that you can hold on to as we do this training. Most of what we're doing today is pretty basic. So we're not doing like anything super fancy. So hopefully we won't get into that space, but super pumped. All right, let's get moving. So I want everyone to stand up. Actually, before I begin, does anybody have any questions about what we're doing or anything I've said before we've Okay, excellent. All right, so I want you to stand and excuse the mess in my house. I have to explain. I've got 2 babies over here that cause many messes. So these are my baby pit bulls, Sabrina and Tadpole. They're very useless, but they cause many messes. All right, so I want you to stand with your feet shoulder width apart, coming into a quarter squat, step 1 foot forward and 1 foot back. Your back heel should be off the floor and about 60% of your weight should be distributed into your back foot. You're gonna bring your knuckles to your cheeks, elbows into your ribs. Your chin is tucked, your abs are tight. This is your fighting stance. To move forward, I'm gonna pick up the front foot, push off the back. To move backwards, I'm gonna pick up the back foot, push off the front. It'll look like forward, step, step, back, step, step. On me, forward, back, forward, back, forward, back, forward, back. All right, moving left and right. To move left, I'm gonna pick up the left foot, push off the right. To move right, I'm gonna pick up the right foot, push off the left. It'll look like left, step, step, right, step, step. On me, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, forward, back, left, right, forward, back, left, right. Good. All right. So now, over the course of the pandemic, I've gotten very good at just demonstrating with inanimate objects. So this is my opponent. Please notice the motorcycle jacket that my opponent is wearing. All right. So if I am in a fight with my motorcycle jacket wearing chair, what I want to do is stay outside of his elbows. Does that make sense? So in between your elbows, if I look at the screen, is where you have access to all of your strikes, right? You've got your punches, you've got your elbows, your knees, your kicks, all of that comes in between the elbows. So this is the area in my opponent that I want to avoid. Does that make sense? So if I'm with my motorcycle jacket wearing chair, I want to stay outside of his elbows. At the same time, I want to keep him inside of my elbows. Does that make sense? So I'm outside of my motorcycle jacket wearing chair's elbows. The motorcycle jacket wearing chair is inside of my elbows. This way I can throw my strikes and I get my target and he doesn't get his strikes because I'm out of the way. Does that make sense? So what I want you to do is I want you to, unless you have somebody available to you, in which case grab them and use them, right? With permission, of course. I want you to imagine an opponent and I want you to use the footwork we just worked on and circle outside of your opponent's elbows while keeping them inside of ours. So there's a lot of things to focus on here, right? That footwork we just worked on, being sure that you step with the foot in the direction that you're moving, working on circling rather than moving backwards. We always want to avoid moving backwards, right? So circling, 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 keeping those hands at your face, and of course, good head movement. Does that make sense? It may feel a little silly at first, but I promise it's useful. All right. So another thing that we do in Guerrera is we say on 3, 1, 2, 3, and we clap. If you don't want to get your leg all the way up, or that's not accessible to you, you can just clap, that's fine. But if it's accessible to you, we say on 3, 1, 2, 3, clap, and go. Move it around, keeping the knuckles at your cheeks, imagining this opponent in front of you, moving around them, keeping them inside of your elbows, staying outside of theirs. Good. And squats, be shoulder width apart, driving the knees out over the ankles, keeping the back flat and the chest lifted.
Colleen, quick question for you.
I'm ready.
If folks are at an office or sitting in a chair, what could they be doing to kind of to get this vibe with us?
I want you to envision it. So this is like when I'm preparing for a fight, what my coach tells me to do is envision what you're doing, right? So picture the fight, and say, okay, this person is doing this. How do I respond? So essentially, you're envisioning these concepts and you're responding. Oh my gosh, somebody has a punching bag. Heck yes. So we're ready. So envisioning the fight and what's happening and responding to it in time, right? Or if you have like a little cubicle and you feel comfortable with everybody seeing you, this is about working in confined spaces. So feel free to just hop up in your cubicle, right? Give me some good head movement. Give me some good, just like little baby circles. And I'm super happy with that. Does that make sense? All right, perfect. So now, fam, what we're going to talk about are our basic straight punches, right? So my lead side straight punch, let me give you a full view. My lead side straight punch is my jab. So no matter which foot is forward, doesn't matter, left foot's forward, my left hand is my jab, right foot's forward, my right hand is my jab. So my jab just means lead side straight punch. That's it. So my elbows are in at my ribs, my knuckles are at my cheeks, my chin is tucked. I look through my eyebrows at my opponent and I extend my lead side hand. The footwork here is just a baby step. So I just take a little baby step forward as I throw my jab. Does that make sense? Now, to make a fist, because I always forget to teach this part, but it's really important, you're going to curl your fingers under and brace your peace finger knuckles with your thumb. So the thumb goes on the outside or else you'll break it. So the thumb goes on the outside, curl the fingers under and brace here. You can also always throw a palm heel strike if you want to protect your knuckles, in which you're hitting with this part. Does that make sense? So either one's great. All right. So we're going to get in our fighting stance and I'm going to call jab. As I call jab, you give me that little baby step, you send your hand out and you bring it back to your face as quickly as possible. So it'll look like jab, jab. Y'all ready? Jab, 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 jab. Good, jab. Good, now put the other side forward. So put the right foot forward if you have the left foot forward if you have the right foot forward, and try it on the other side. Jab, 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 jab. Good, everybody looks great. And one thing I want to emphasize is that when we throw our jab, we don't want to muscle it, right? We don't want to like send it out really hard the whole time. I want you to send your arm really loose. So think like Conor McGregor noodles, yes? Send it out nice and loose, and you're going to tighten it at the very end. So it starts loose and it tightens at the end. So as I throw my jab, it's jab, send it loose, and tighten. All right, let's try that one more time. Jab. Oh, that looks so much better. Jab, jab, jab. Good. All right, now let's look at the cross. The cross is going to be a little bit more difficult. So the cross, I'm pivoting off the rear side foot. So my cross is coming off my back hand. It's a much more powerful punch, but it also requires a little bit more technical proficiency. So the biggest and most important part is the pivot. So I turn my knee in and my heel out. I'm driving into the floor. It's as if I'm turning a screwdriver. So when we use a screwdriver, we both have to push it into the floor and turn it at the same time. Does that make sense? You can't just turn the screwdriver and you can't just push the screwdriver in. You have to turn it and screw it. So that's what we're doing. I pivot, 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 pivot. As I do that, I'm going to send the rear hand. So the rotation comes from the pivot and the arm is just along for the ride. Does that make sense? So this is my jab and this is my cross. I pivot and bring it back to my face. Does that make sense? All right, let's try that out. So it'll look like cross, 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 switch sides, other foot forward. Cross, 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 cross. Good, and time. How is everybody feeling? All like 10 of you that I can see, I'm super hyped. All right, I'm about it. All right, so now we're gonna put this together into what we call a combination, right? So a combination is any number of punches that are strung together, right? We can jabs, crosses, hooks, uppercuts, whatever. Today, we're just gonna focus on straight punches. So when I call combo, I want you to throw your jab and then your cross. So the way that this works is as I send my jab out, it pulls my cross side back. I pivot and that drives my jab side back. So it goes right from one into the other, which is super, super nice, right? The mechanics are the centrifugal force. One of the interpreters needs to tell me how to say centrifugal force because I'm going to start trying to teach this course in Spanish and I have no idea how to say centrifugal force. So somebody got to teach me how to say that and we'll be good. All right. Are you going to tell me right
now? Fuerza centrífuga.
Okay. I'm going to have you type that, but that sounds amazing. All right. So jab and cross, that centrifugal force. And I'm pivoting off my back foot. I step and I pivot. So if you see my feet, I step and I pivot. I step and I pivot. I step and I pivot. Cool, cool. So that's my combo. So when I yell combo, huss, huss, and I move. Combo, huss, huss, and I move. Combo, huss, huss, and I move. Does that make sense? All right, fam. We're going to do on three. On three. 1, 2, 3. And combo. Good. Combo. 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 I love the bag happening. I love the bag happening. Combo. 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 All right, put the other foot forward. Try it again. And combo. 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 Beautiful. All right, how are we feeling? Okay, awesome. So, and this is where we're gonna do one more drill, and I'm gonna leave a lot of time for discussion and questions. Typically, this lesson that I'm teaching you takes a whole hour, right? It takes a whole hour because we get Amanda's nodding her head because she knows, and Nisha's nodding her head because she knows they're my guerreras. They are my guerreras. They've done the course before. They know how detailed we get and how picky I get, right? Because this is the foundation, right, upon which we build. Today we're gonna blast through it because we don't have a lot of time, and because quite frankly, y'all are pros. You're picking it up very, very well. All right, so we're gonna get into what I call a flurry drill. So what we lack in skill, we make up for in aggression. And aggression is a skill. Because as women and femmes, we have been conditioned and we have been taught to not take up space, to not advocate for ourselves, to not be aggressive, right? We're taught to be quiet and demure and small. And that's the opposite of what I want in this. I want you to take up space, to be loud, to be aggressive. All of those things are so vitally important when it comes to advocating for yourself in a professional setting, right? Advocating for yourself and your bodily autonomy in a self-defense setting, right? It's crucial. It's absolutely crucial. So we're going to practice aggression. Aggression is a skill. We have to practice it to put it into our bodies. Let me tell you, I am naturally a very aggressive person, but I practice aggression every single day. And it's still sometimes inaccessible to me. So it's a tool that we really have to cultivate, to access, all right? So what we're gonna do, and it's gonna seem very silly, is we're going to throw punches as hard and as fast as we can in the air, right? So when I tell you flurry, go. Right? So that's a flurry. Now, if you're like, Colleen, that's utter silliness. I'm not going to punch the air. That's okay. You can punch a pillow. So it's not quite the same drill. It's a little bit different, but sometimes the gratification of punching an actual object is worth it to change the drill a little bit. So we'll change it to a ground and pound drill. For a ground and pound drill, you're going to sit on top of your cushion and you're going to punch the pillow. Because remember, it's not about the technique of the punches. It's about cultivating the aggression. That's what this drill is about. When you do it on a ground and pound, the elbows are going to come out. So when we punch in the air, the elbows stay in. When we punch down to the ground, the elbows come out. And that's an important distinction. Does that make sense? All right. So all I want is absolutely everything in your body for 15 seconds at a time. Because what do y'all got going on the rest of the day? Nothing. You're sitting, right? This is Nisha's like typing. I need everything in your body. This is about aggression. This is about giving it everything you've got. This is about advocating for yourself in a physical way. Does that make sense? All right. So whoever is controlling the screen, I advocate we put it on Nisha for the next 2 minutes so that, or Amanda, who's like one of the most aggressive people I've ever met in like the most wonderful way. I'm not calling you out, Amanda. So because I'm just going to sit here and watch you. So that will be absolutely no fun. All right. So with permission, highlight one of those two. All right. 15 seconds at a time. Are you ready? And we'll do it as long as I freaking feel like it. All right, here we go. In 3, 2, 1, and go. Yes, keep going, 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 keep going. In 3, 2, 1, and time. Rest, 15 seconds. We're doing it again. How are we feeling, fam? Yes, I love it. All right. In 3, 2, 1, and go. In 3, 2, 1, and go. Time. Stop. Not go. Stop. Good work. You know what I meant. In 3, 2, 1, and go. That's it. Keep it up, fam. Keep it up. Keep it up. Keep it up. 3, 2, 1, and time. All right, fam. So you've got one more. Just one more. I'm being kind, right? So what I want you to do in this next one is I want you to envision the thing that you love the most in this world, right? Maybe it's a partner. Maybe it's your human rights. Maybe it's your identity, right? Maybe it's yourself, right? Maybe it's your kid, whatever it is. I want you to think about that thing and put it in your head. What is it that you live for? And in the next 15 seconds, I want you to fight for that thing, for that person, for that ideal. Does that make sense? All right, fam, here we go. In 3, 2, 1, and go. And time. Nice
work. It is amazing how when we have that little pep talk and I say, this is what you're fighting for, how much the aggression goes from like high to like intense. Because when we know what we're fighting for in our brains, we give it our all, right? We give it our all. And when we're talking about self-defense, everything's on the line. So be sure that as you're doing this, remember what you're fighting for every single day in everything that you do. Advocate for it. It's worth it, right? Does anybody have any questions? I know you're probably trying to get your breath back. And feel free to ask questions in the chat too, if you don't want to speak up. And believe it or not, I haven't drank any coffee today, so.
I have one question.
I'm ready.
Is it, I mean, I don't know, I mean, in this kind of, I don't know how you call it, thrill, but might be disturbing to be yelling or shouting, but I don't know if it's useful in a fighting thing to be yelling, yes, whistling and just making noise and talking bad words, or is it descending? So I don't know.
Such an important question. I'm so glad you asked it. So I advocate that you're as loud as you can be, right? When we're talking about a self-defense situation, hopefully it brings the attention of other people to our situation. And this becomes muddled when we have an identity that makes us at higher risk of experiencing violence, right? When we talk about trans or non-binary people or people of color, a lot of the times, even when attention is drawn to our situation, people, and I'm saying their situation, people aren't necessarily going to come to their aid at the same rate that they might come to mine as a white cisgender heterosexual woman, right? But we want to give ourselves as much chance as possible. So understanding the limitations of identity, we also want to bring as much attention to the situation as possible with the hopes that somebody comes and helps us. Beyond that, the more you exhale, the more you inhale. And that allows you to keep breathing, because it's very tempting to hold our breath and punch. But oxygen is our number one fuel source. Energy is a fuel source too, I guess. But oxygen is our number one fuel source. So it's important that we continue to breathe. And the more you scream, the more you exhale, the more you inhale, and it allows you to continue to breathe. So that's an amazing question.
So I have much more of an early question, and I want to clarify for everyone who has been connected through our event, that one of our main purposes when inviting Colleen in was also to have the opportunity of just experiencing how being supported in ways of self-care felt. So I wonder, Colleen, if you can tell us a bit more about feminist self-defense, its relationship to self-care and collective care. In a way, I guess self-care, I mean, we could just say, like, of course it is self-care because we are preventing from us receiving direct physical violence. But I can see throughout what you're teaching us that there is much more of what we're learning here than just physical defense, right? Or just being able to hold and manage ourselves physically. So can you tell us a little bit more about how you see that relationship?
Oh, that might be one of the best questions I've ever been asked. So thank you for that. If this is something that you're interested in, I highly recommend this book. It's called Real Knockouts, The Physical Feminism of Women's Self-Defense. I think the limitations of this book are that, and I think every book that you're gonna get, is it's very limited to cis women. I don't remember them talking about trans or non-binary femmes as much, but it's a really amazing book that talks about a feminist approach to self-defense. But in terms of self-care, there's exactly what you just said. There's the immediate concern of my body is in danger and I need to take care of myself. I need to advocate for myself physically. But just from my own personal experience, I think that my relationship with the outside world, specifically with men, was so complicated by my inability to advocate for myself, even verbally. And it wasn't until I started training physically that I got the courage to advocate for myself more verbally, that I got the courage to ask my boss for a raise, or to advocate for myself, or to stand up to somebody that was being a problem to me verbally. When we feel strong and confident and capable in our bodies, it exudes and it spreads and it manifests itself in other areas of our lives, right? I think this is going to sound really ridiculous, but I've been thinking about this a lot. I've been watching Cobra Kai, and everybody's laughing. If you've watched that show, it's hilarious. But I think about the way that I was bullied as a kid, and how if I had known what I know now, it's really hard to allow someone's words to cut you that deeply when you know you can kick them in the head, which sounds ridiculous, but there's something about feeling physically competent that gives you courage even in other situations. And you don't need to use that violence, right? You don't need to inflict that violence, but having it as a tool for good can sometimes be so reassuring. I think also I think one of the beautiful things about this series was you all talked about self-care, but you also talked about collective care, right? And how we care for each other. And I know that I have felt much more comfortable advocating physically for other people now that I have training. So for example, one day I was in downtown DC and a man was harassing a woman publicly. There was hundreds of people. It was rush hour in downtown DC, and there were hundreds and hundreds of people, and nobody was coming to her aid. This man was screaming in her face. And I went up to her and I took her away and I said, "Hey, like, I'm so glad to see you. How are you?" You know, like, and she looked at me like, "I don't know who you are." And I said, "Just go with it." And I pulled her away right as he threw something at her. So he missed her in large part because we had separated ourselves. And I think of that moment, and I didn't do anything extraordinary, right? Like, all I did was pull her away and talk to her, but I would have never done that if I didn't feel that I could advocate for myself physically. So there's the ability to advocate for yourself physically infiltrates into your mental confidence, into your self-confidence in terms of how you interact with the world, and also your confidence to assist others. And then when we talk about self-care, when we talk about collective care, having that ability is so beautiful because it really opens doors for us. I think that for me, training has helped me feel strong, capable, safe in my body. One of the things that drives me crazy about the way that typically cishet white men advertise self-defense is they use fear-mongering techniques like, oh, like violence against women and well, they don't say femmes, they don't care, but violence against women is rampant and this is what you'll experience and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, we know, we live in bodies that experience fear at your hands every single day. And to be able to live without fear, well, with fear, there's a healthy amount of fear that we should feel, right? But with less fear, with this feeling of confidence that I can take care of myself. And even if I don't win, I know that I'm going to be able to put up a fight and I know I'm going to be able to advocate for myself is really, really powerful. So I'm rambling a lot, but the moral to the story is that feeling confident, capable, and safe in your body infiltrates other areas of your well-being.
I think that's amazing because I think you bring in a way an idea of holistic care about how our bodies relate to our emotions and also to our spirits, and then also present from an individual level to a collective level or to a structural level, which is part of what we have been talking throughout today's event. We have been talking we have been trying to extend the idea of self-care, not just to take some health practices or maybe personal practices, but how these practices will actually transcend if we connect them in the right ways to our environments for making them holistic care, radical care, feminist care, as many of the words that we have brought here on which is the right focus for self-care when we are approaching it from a structural side. Oriana, I see that you're preparing yourself. Would you like to make an additional question?
Sorry, I was gonna just plug my microphone. No, it's just like I wanted to see, because this part of the collective care, I think that it's really important in self-defense, and I think that in Mexico, it was just more of a comment that in Mexico, it's, you know, because of there's a lot of femicide violence. I think that self-defense has become a very relevant, crucial tool that people need to have just to like be able to feel safer, even though violence itself, you know, like femicides are not necessarily happening like for a random person on the street, but self-defense gives you all these things that Colleen was saying in terms of feeling safer and feeling more able to advocate for yourself and these kind of things. But also, how do we make sure that we are building, because it's like a community of care that is teaching us self-defense and is there as a I would say like as a tool for all of us to have that kind of community of teachers of self-defense being able to spread the techniques and to spread the movement and make sure that we have the tools that we need for that, you know, like to ignite that kind of security. And I don't know how else to explain that in English, but you know, like that confidence that you can take care of yourself. So I really appreciate your work, Colleen. Thank you very much for teaching us and for having Guerrera in the world and for being part of that
it is my whole heart. And if I could just say, one of the things that Diana talked about that I think is so important is that this is radical, right? When we think about how women and femmes are supposed to comport ourselves, it is radical to say that violence is a part of that. So I just love that you use that word, Diana, because I think, oh, look at my hair. I got a little messed up. I think that it's important to recognize that what we're doing is completely destroying the pillars of the system, of the patriarchal system. So, yes. Beautiful word choices. Excellent word choices.
And Colleen, where can we find you?
Oh,
if we wanted to take further opportunities to engage in feminist self-defense.
So I have not updated the website for this. Actually, I'm very hopeful that this will be make this more accessible to you all. But unfortunately, my next self-defense training can't be in person, so it's going to be online again, which is what Amanda and Nisha did last time. So if you're interested in taking a 6-week online self-defense course, I will be teaching it starting the second week in September. There are scholarships available. The scholarships are specifically for women and femmes that have elements of their identity that make them at larger risk for experiencing violence. So people of color, trans and non-binary folks, folks without documents, any element of your identity that puts you at higher risk for experiencing violence makes you eligible for a scholarship. So please, please, please do not let finances get in the way of you taking this training. Especially with online, there's no space limitation. So like, I'll take as many folks on scholarship as we can fit into the room, right? So if that's something that you're interested in, please be a part of it. Please invite your friends. I'm also hosting a Guerrera retreat in Asheville, North Carolina. It will be 4 days, 8 seminars, and then bonfires and breweries and hot tubs and hiking and water holes, and it'll be a wonderful time. So if you're interested in a 4-day self-care retreat, I would love to invite you for that. And all the details are on the website that Amanda just posted in the chat. So there's a self-defense tab and a retreat tab. Feel free to explore all of those. There's also a documentary about Guerrera that exists somewhere in the world if you want to see that. I don't know if it's public yet. It might still be on the film festival circuit, but someday it'll exist.
Thank you, Colleen. We have just a couple of minutes left, so if any member of the public has any additional questions, please send them on the chat box. And well, as time has gone by in this very fun and also interesting event, I would just like to wrap up, maybe retaking some of the reflections that we have had around self-care during this event. I think we started upon a basis by which I think we all agree on, and is that there is a very tight and needed relationship between self-care and collective care. Whether we're looking at it from a place of understanding the relationship that our self-care has in a systemic oppressions world, in which taking care of ourselves and with others in a way that is also structural can be a motor for social change, or whether we are talking about how self-care is not just about a burden or just activities that individuals do, but about how, as a society, as social actors, as NGOs, as institutions, as health providers, we are enablers for an environment, an ecosystem that actually allows self-care. And in that way, when we talk about self-care, we're always talking about collective care. We have highlighted the importance that participation of women, of trans people, of people of color, and of others have in the building of self-care actions. Many of these ideas that enablers might have on how to do self-care are being done in terms of public policy, of legislation, or just of programming, without taking into account the voices of the people who they want to work for. So there is an importance of recognizing the knowledge, the empirical and historical knowledge that women have, that trans people have, that children have, that people of color have, and how to recognize that knowledge into the practices that we do from our organizations as professionals or as individuals. Then we have also talked about the need of questioning self-care as a category that might be just emptied into relieving some of the burdens of an exploitative system, of a capitalist system that might harm us. So we need to rethink self-care in terms of a feminist approach, both in civil society or also for institutions, for the health system, for the economic system. And in that way, to make sure that all these ways of care that we have been talking about, as Colleen was mentioning to us, is connected and is integral, is holistic. And it's also radical, which has been our word for today. So thank you very much for all our amazing speakers, for Oriana as my co-moderator, for the White Ribbon Alliance, who has helped us to organize this greatly, especially Amanda Livingston, and to all of our participants today. We hope you have joined this space and that now you have many more thoughts of what you can do in order to support collective care.
Hey, thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Boniface.
You're welcome. Bye.